Welcome back to our disaster management course. I am Dr. Muni Pradeep, Assistant Professor, Department of Civil Engineering, SR University. And we are continuing the Unit 1, that is Introduction to Disaster Management. And today we are on Lecture 4, Part B. So last class we discussed same lecture for Part A. So today the continuation session. So our topic for this session is same prevention and mitigation strategies. So without delay, I'll start the session. So, in the last lecture, we discussed about the Uttarkasi disaster 2025, which is a real-world application of the disaster management cycle. So, this case study is very recent and highly relevant. That's why we discussed in the last class. So, again, I'm not explaining everything. So, I'll quickly recap what we discussed in the last session. So, what we discussed from this case study. So, and what we learned several important lessons. The first one is pre-disaster investment in prevention, mitigation, and preparedness directly determines the scale of a damage and the speed of a recovery. I'm repeating, the first lesson what we learned, the pre-disaster investment in prevention, mitigation, and preparedness directly determines the scale of damage and the speed of the recovery. Every gap in the preparedness column lead to a worst outcome in the response and recovery column. So last class, this table. So the second column is what should have to happen, and third one is what actually happened. So that is what. And the second lesson, what we learned, that is national response capacity through NDRF and through army is even though very strong, but the local preparedness remains the weakest link in Indians disaster management chain. So that's why that much disaster happened in 2025. And the third one, reconstruction must address the root causes of vulnerability. So the outdated hazard mapping must be updated, the construction regulations must be enforced, and slope stabilization works must be completed before the next monsoon season. So these are the three things we discussed, three lessons we learned from the Uttarkasi disaster. Right? Now, this slide is the disaster preparedness plan. So now we are focused specifically on disaster preparedness. So previous sessions I explained the preparedness, mitigation, preparedness, response, recovery, everything as a outlines. So now we are specifically focused on disaster preparedness. This is one of the three key activities of the pre-disaster phase. Pre-disaster means before disaster occur, what we do. Okay, so this preparedness is sometimes underestimated compared to the more dramatic activities of responses and reconstruction, but it is in fact the activity that has a greatest impact on reducing the disaster casualties as well as suffering. Okay, so this slide presents actually here I mentioned two authorities, the definitions from the two authorities of disaster preparedness from leading international organizations. So here I mentioned two organizations, that is IFRC and UNDRO. These two are internationally recognized organizations in disaster management. So please go through the definitions. I'll give you 30 seconds of time. You quickly go through the slide. Okay, we'll start the first definition. As per IFRC, that is International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. So it is established in 2005. It is an international body. So as per IFRC, the disaster preparedness is a continuous and integrated process which involving a wide range of activities and resources from multi-sectorial sources. I'm repeating, disaster preparedness is a continuous and integrated process which involving a wide range of activities and resources from multi-sectorial sources. Don't worry, I'll decode word by word. So I'll give you the second definition also as per UNDRO. United Nations Disaster Relief Organizations, which is established in 40 years before 1982. So as per UNDRO, the disaster preparedness refers to measures which are designed to organize and to facilitate timely and effective rescue, relief and rehabilitation operations in case of disaster. So here I am highlighting only IFRC because in IFRC they already do the modifications whatever the guidelines given by UNDRO. Okay, now let us break this definition. So here the important word is the continuous. The word continuous tells us that preparedness is not one-time activity. So the continuous means the preparedness is not one-time activity. You cannot simply conduct a training program once in a year and consider yourself prepared for the next 10 years. No, that is very wrong. The preparedness requires ongoing maintenance, the regular updating on new technologies, and periodic testings through the mock drills and many simulations. So that is the importance of the word continuous, right? It is continuous process. And the second word in the definition is that is integrate. The word integrated tells us that the preparedness cannot done by one agency or one department alone, right? There is a requirement of integration. It requires the coordination across multiple sectors such as the government body, the civil society, the private sector, the communities and in international organizations. See here the integration means the coordination between many sectors such as government bodies, civil society, the private sector, the local communities and international organizations. Okay, that's why I'm highlighting the word integrated. Especially in India, effective disaster preparedness requires coordination among, there is a board called District Disaster Management Authority, the State Health Department, the State Health Police Department, and the Fire Department, and NDRF team, that is National Disaster Responsible Force, local self-government bodies, and the community voluntary organizations. If all these organizations work simultaneously, then only we can achieve, we can say we are prepared. Okay, and the third was the third important word in the definition, that is called wide range of activities and resources from multi-sectorial sources. I'm repeating that phrase, a wide range of activities and resources from multi-sectorial sources, which confirms that preparedness is not just about stockpiling some food and medicines. So it is not highlighting these things. So it is encompasses the training, the planning, the communication system, all the institutional capacities and the education to the community and much more. So when you are ready about all these activities, then only that communities, we can easily say we are prepared for the next disaster. All right, I hope you understand the definition very clearly. So next slide, you can see here, please go through the slide for 30 seconds. I know that image is not visible clearly, so you can take a screenshot and you can please zoom the image. Okay, so I have mentioned the source also. You can directly go to that source. You can download both the pictures. Okay. Right. I'll start. So this slide presents a visual overview of the components and activities that constitute a disaster preparedness. I'm repeating, this slide presents a visual overview of the components as well as activities that constitute a disaster preparedness. So this figure presents a comprehensive picture of what a prepared community or organization looks like. Okay, so look at the various elements shown in this diagram. See, a fully prepared community or a system typically has several key components working together. Then only we called as we are prepared for that situation. The first one is plans and protocol. So here I am not explaining in detail because in previous lecture I explained in detail all the plans. So here simply I am summarizing the what are the 7 systems working together so that we can ready to for we can climb, we are prepared for the next disaster. The first one is proper plans and to follow the protocols, and second one is about the early warning systems. After early warning system, the third one is emphasis about the trainings and mock drills, and the fourth one is about emergency supplies and equipment, which includes food, medicines, first aid kits, all these things. And the fifth one is highlighting about the safe shelters, evacuation plans, how to reach that evacuation plans, where we have to stay. And the sixth one is about communication and information system. So in the disaster phase, many false information is spreading through the community. So what kind of communication and information system is adding positive aspect? So when all these components are in place and regularly tested, so then a community is genuinely prepared to respond to a disaster swiftly, effectively, and with minimal loss of life. See, here I am emphasizing minimal loss of life. See, um, like eradicating 100% of deaths is very impossible. So here we are will minimize the loss of life as much as possible. Okay. Next. So next topic is key concepts of disaster preparedness. So I think within 2 to 3 parts I will complete this one. Please go through the slide for 30 seconds. I'm giving the 30 seconds time. You go through the slide, then I'll start explaining. So total we have 5 key concepts. So in the first slide I discussed about the first 3 concepts. The next slide again 2 concepts are there. Total 5 concepts are there. I'll explain in this. Okay. So this slide outlines 3 of the 5 key concepts that underpin effective disaster preparedness. So these 5 concepts come from the internationally agreed framework for disaster preparedness developed through the United Nations and regional disaster management bodies. So these concepts are not approved by our Indian government. This was approved from the internationally acclaimed disaster management bodies. Okay. So what is that bodies? That we'll discuss in the coming classes. Don't worry. So this today topic is about the preparedness. Right. What is the first key concept? Go through the first key concept, the strengthening the policy, technical and institutional capacities. I'm repeating, strengthening the policies, technical and institutional capacities. Now everyone has doubt, what is the policies, technical and institutional capacities? I'll explain. See, an effective disaster preparedness requires strong capacity at major 3 levels. That is, the first one is policy, second one is technical, third one is institutional capacities. And these capacities must be built at regional level, national level and local level simultaneously. The first national, state, district, local. So every level we have to build this, strengthening these policies. The policy capacity means, here the term policy capacities. The policy capacity means having a clear, a legally backed policies and plans for disaster management at every level of government. I'm repeating, the policy capacity means, the first word is policy. The policy capacity means which is having very clear, very legally backed policies and plans for disaster management at every level of government. In India, this means having a national disaster management plan, a state disaster management plan, and district disaster management plans. All are regularly updated and properly resourced. So what are all these bodies? That is only our next lecture. Lecture 5 is all about the institutional bodies. Okay. So technically, the technical capacity means, the first one is policies is over. Now second one is about technical capacity, which means having the scientific and engineering expertise to understand and assess what are the disaster risks happen, the design effective mitigation measures, and implement responses and recovery operations. So this is where the civil engineers, the geotechnical engineers, the hydrologists, seismologists, and other technical professionals play a very direct and very essential role in technical capacities, because these engineers only they can easily identify what are the infrastructural losses, all losses. The first one is about policies, the second one is about technical knowledge where engineers are directly involved, and the third one is institutional capacities. What is the institutional capacities? Which means having a functioning organizations with trained staff, which is having adequate budgets, clear mandates, what to follow, what not to follow, and the authorities to act. So here I'll give you the examples. India's an NDMA, that is National Disaster Management Authority, NDRF Board, SDMAs, District Disaster Management Authorities. All of these comes under institutional framework for this capacity. But their effectiveness mainly depending upon how well they are funded, the recruitment of the staff, whether the staff is sufficient or not, and how they are empowered. So the first key concept is mainly highlighting the policies. Second one is technical knowledge, and third one is institutional capacities, where funding, that training, everything is taking place. Right now, please go through the key concept too. I'll give you a 10 seconds time, then I'll explain. Because this preparedness is very important in disaster management aspects, where majority people will get jobs, everything in this preparedness plan only. Okay. So now coming to the key concept 2, that is promoting a dialogue, the information exchange, and the coordination. Right? Okay. So I'll explain in detail, don't worry. So the disaster preparedness cannot be effective in silos. What is the meaning of silos? Because you can see this word many places, many subjects also. It is silos. Silos have different meanings in different contexts. So, but today I'm explaining the meaning of silos in disaster management point of view, which refers to the dangerous practices of organizations, all the government departments, all the NDRF, all teams. They're operating in isolation, they're failing to share the information, they're failing to share the resources or strategies to other departments. So all the departments are available, they have requisite funding, they have everything, but they are unable to share the knowledge from one department to another department. Everyone is working in isolation. That concept is called silos, and disaster preparedness cannot be effective in silos. Okay. So see here, different agencies such as healthcare department, the police department, the fire department, and engineering department, especially civil engineering department, the revenue department, education department, and the power department where electricity is there, and the water supply department. All these departments must have communicate and coordinate with each other. When all these agencies are operate independently without sharing the information, or without sharing the coordinating plans, the result is very fragmented, very inefficient, and sometimes contradictory responses. Even though we are spending crores and crores of money, we are getting negative results. So now the aim of promoting the dialogue and the information exchange is to create a holistic approach, that is complete approach to disaster risk reduction. So here, where all the agencies understand their role, they know each other's role, they know their role also, and they know their friendly neighboring institution role also, and they can operate together seamlessly under pressure. Because under disaster management, under the disaster, all the departments are in severe pressure. In that, under peer pressure, how all the departments are coordinating with each other. That is what we are considered in preparedness. So for this, what we have to do? The regular interagency coordination meetings and the joint exercises, and we have to share the communication platforms. These are the mechanisms through which the coordination is built. Okay. And at the international level, the information is very equally important. See here, inside our Indian departments, the interchange is not sufficient, because As an international level also, the information exchange is very, very equally important. Why? Because see, the countries in the same geographical region which share disaster risks, such as, see, in monsoon floods which affects entire South Asia region, the floods not only affecting the Indian, they are affecting the entire South Asian region. The Indian Ocean tsunamis can affect almost 15 countries simultaneously. So the regional cooperation and disaster preparedness through the frameworks, like the best example is SAARC, the SARC Disaster Management Center, which allows all the countries to share early warning data, learn from each other's experience, and they coordinate responses across all the borders. So the sharing is not only between inside the country, we have to share the knowledge and information through outside the boundaries also. So now coming to the key concept 3, that is strengthening and developing coordinated regional approaches. So here I am emphasizing strengthening and developing a coordinated regional approaches. Okay, don't worry, I'll explain in detail. So the disaster risks do not respect administrative boundaries. I'm repeating, the disaster risks do not respect administrative boundaries. For suppose a cyclone forming in a Bay of Bengal may strike coastal areas across all the 3 or 4 states, right? And for suppose if you take any major earthquake in the Himalaya region belt, which may affect not only our states, it may affect the Nepal, the Bhutan, and several Indian states simultaneously. And if we consider the drought affecting the Deccan Plateau, may span multiple state boundaries. So, sorry, this is why preparedness planning must have a very strong regional dimensions. State must be prepared and regularly review disaster preparedness plans that anticipate cross-border disaster scenarios. And also, the regional disaster response services such as NDRF battalions, specialized search teams, and the rescue teams, which is having whether they have sufficient equipment or not, and stockpiling of emergency supplies, which is including food and medicines. So they all must be positioned to respond very quickly across a region, not just within a single administrative area. All these things should not available in single administrative area, which has to be available across the regions. These are the first 3 fundamental concepts. Now quickly we'll go to the 4th concept. Please go through the key concept 4 and 5 so that I'll continue. So this slide continues with the remaining 2 key concepts of disaster preparedness. Okay, so first 3 concepts are always already talking about the installment of policies, technical buildings, the engineering departments, and the coordination between the countries and states, bodies, different organizations. Now these 2 concepts are emphasizing other side of the coin. So now I'll quickly start the key concept 4, that is establishing emergency funds for preparedness measures. So while talking, we can say anything and it is everything possible. But in the actual field, all these things are possible when you have sufficient fund. Okay, so now we are dealing with that key concept. One of the most significant barriers to effective disaster preparedness is the lack of dedicated and accessible funding. If every country is having sufficient funding, then every country is having very effective disaster management bodies, but practically it is wrong statement, because many countries they don't have sufficient fund. So many governments they allocate disaster funds only after a disaster has struck for a response and reconstruction, which is very bad policy, because all governments they allocate disasters funds only when disaster struck the area. They are mainly focusing on responses and reconstruction. So funding for preparedness activities is chronologically underfunded. In papers they may say yeah we funded, but it is underfunded. So the recommendation on this slide is to establish a dedicated emergency funds wherever needed, specifically to support the preparedness measures. For suppose we are talking about in India, the National Disaster Response Fund, NDRF, the National Disaster Response Fund and State Disaster Response Fund. These all are established under the Disaster Management Act, which is established in 2005 for this purposes, only for this purpose. However, in practice, the majority of these funds are used for post-disaster response rather than pre-disaster preparedness. That is very sad. So, the economic argument for funding preparedness is overwhelming. Many studies by international disaster management organizations, they consistently show that 1 rupee invested in preparedness saves between 4 and 10 rupees in post-disaster response cost. So after post disaster, the 10 rupees, whatever we are investing 10 rupees, that is equivalent to, with that 10 rupees, we can save 100 people in the preparedness. So I'll give you one context also. In the 2018 Kerala flood cost the state government over nearly 31,000 crores of rupees in only relief and rehabilitation. So if a fraction of that amount had been invested in improved flood management infrastructure and community preparedness in the years before that floods will happen, so the loss would be substantially smaller, right? This is not just a technical argument, it is one moral one also. See, the failure to invest adequately in preparedness is a policy choice that costs lives. When people die or suffer because of early warning system did not work, and because evacuation plans did not exist, or because emergency supplies were not available, those are preventable deaths, preventable suffering, which is caused by a failure of investment and planning. So this is the very key factor of concept of preparedness plan 4. And the final one, that is a key concept 5, we are developing mechanisms for community and stakeholder participation. See, the first 3 is talking about the government, institutional bodies, everything, and the key concept 4 is highlighting the funding. Now the key concept 5 is mainly focusing on developing mechanisms for community and stakeholder participation. So what is the stakeholder? Everything. So I'll explain. The fifth and final key factor is perhaps the most important in practice. That is the active participation of the local communities and other stakeholders with the spirit of volunteerism in disaster preparedness activities, because government cannot send thousands and thousands of people as NDRF team. So we need active participation from the local voluntary system. So here communities are not just the victims of disasters. They are the first and most important responders to any disaster. When a disaster strikes, so it is neighbors who pull people from the rubble before professional rescue teams arrive. Yes or no? It is our neighbors only, they'll pull from all the debris, all these things. It is local volunteers who know where the elderly people and disabled residents live, and they know the routes to evacuate, and they know the routes to reach the hospitals very early, because my neighbor know how my family members and everything. So it is community leaders, we can communicate warnings in local languages and local dialects that official systems cannot reach, because NDRF team, they don't know the local language, they don't know the local dialect. So these local community people, they are acting bridge between this NDRF team, all the central and state government bodies, and the disaster victims. So here the spirit of volunteerism is very significant. The volunteerism in disaster preparedness cannot be mandated. It must be cultivated through our community engagement and awareness programs and sense of shared responsibility. Right? So when any community, they feel ownership of their own safety, when they participate in designing evacuation plans and they are conducting before without depending on the government. They conduct their own drills, and when they maintain their own emergency supply food stocks, they became very genuinely very resilient and not just reliant on the government rescue. This is what every country needs. So India has a rich tradition of community solidarity in the face of disasters. So I'll give you the context. In the year 2018 floods, nearly 700 fishermen, they voluntarily deployed their own boats to rescue the stranded people, the affected, the victims, which is creating a spontaneous civilian rescue fleet that saved tens of hundreds of lives. So this is the community preparedness at its finest level. The extraordinary voluntary response to the 2018 the floods, the famous Kerala fishermen, they used their own boats to rescue nearly, can you imagine the number? They rescue nearly 65,000 people from flooded areas. An effort now known as the Fisherman Initiative. It is a powerful example of what a community participation and voluntaries can achieve during the disaster time. So this is what the main key highlighting of the disaster preparedness plans. So we discussed all 5 key concepts. So first 3 concepts is about the government, the fourth one is about the funding, the fifth one is local community. So as a community, how we are acting together. Okay. So with this, I just want to conclude this session because I just want to explain the preparedness as only one lecture. So in the coming lessons, you can see in the coming lessons, I'll explain about the prevention measures. So till now, we are talking about the preparedness. Right? If disaster will hit us, we will respond. So this is a very like a real time scenario, and the next session is about prevention measures. So how we will prevent the disaster? You can see here. So next slide, in the next part, I'll discussing about the prevention measures. And we already discussed the disaster management cycle theoretically. I'll give you some real world examples, right? Which is including disaster plan. Next one, disaster mitigation, which is including both structural and non-structural. And then I'll summarize this lecture 4. Right? I hope you like this session. This brings the end of the lecture 4 part B. So this lecture is very informative and practically useful. This is for both your examination point of view as well as your thinking level. Okay, right. Please review today's notes before the next class. So if you have any questions, reach out to me to nmp560@gmail.com. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next class. Thank you very much.